Hi everyone, and welcome to the Sleepy Scientist. I'm really happy you're here. Tonight, we're going to go on a calm and quiet trip to learn something amazing. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's enjoy this peaceful science story together. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? If you like relaxing science videos, don't forget to tap the like button. Now let's begin.
Long before oceans waved or skies turned blue, before leaves shimmered in sunlight or winds whispered across valleys, there was only dust, a floating hush of matter scattered in the dark arms of the galaxy. This dust, born from ancient stars that had died in slow, glowing collapses, drifted in silence across cold space. It was not the kind of dust you sweep from a shelf or shake from a coat, but a sacred dust, tiny specks of carbon and iron, oxygen and silicon, the kind that once glowed inside suns. This stardust carried secrets, like letters written in the language of atoms, sealed in silence for eons, by the quiet tug of gravity, forming a great glowing disk. Inside that disk, things moved slowly, clumping, colliding, warming, minute by minute, pebble by pebble. What had once floated aimlessly began to take shape. It did not look like a planet at first. It was chaos, fire and stone and vapor. The early Earth was a ball of violence, wrapped in magma, spinning under meteor showers that lit the sky with fire and ash. But even then, something was beginning. Quiet preparation for gentleness. As time crept forward, the Earth began to cool. The outer crust, once molten, hardened like a crust over soup, and steam became water, falling back to the ground as rain. And it rained for centuries. The skies wept until valleys filled, and the first oceans were born, wide and deep and warm. These oceans shimmered under a dim sun, blanketing the scarred young planet in silence. The air, still thick with ancient gases, began to shift, touched by minerals and steam and the endless breathing of the sea. In the hush of underwater vents, warm currents curled up from beneath the crust, rich with minerals and heat. These places, hidden deep beneath the newborn ocean, pulsed like quiet hearts. Their chemistry danced with time. Molecules touched and tangled. Some clung together, others floated off, but slowly, ever so slowly, certain patterns began to form. Amino acids, fatty membranes, fragile strands that could copy themselves. These were not life, not yet, but they were trying. They were beginnings. In the warmth and dark, these molecules swirled, bumping against each other like whispers in a dream. Some scientists believe that bubbles formed, tiny pockets that held new chains of chemistry. Others wonder if clay helped hold these shapes still, letting time work longer on each combination. No one knows for sure. And then it copied again. It made errors, but some errors helped it survive. And what had once been dust now carried the echo of desire, not for riches or war or sound, but for continuity, for memory, for life. Earth, once a fiery globe of chaos, now held inside its oceans a quiet song, a repeating rhythm of molecules, learning how to live. And the oceans, vast and wide, became a cradle. The sky above them began to change, too, clearing with time, touched by the breath of the sea. Storms still rolled and lightning still struck, but the world was no longer silent. The seas murmured, the air pulsed. Something was watching, in a way only matter can watch. Through presence, through continuation. The earth spun on. Tides rocked gently. Sunlight filtered through thick clouds. And in that watery stillness, the dust that had once drifted between stars was becoming something new, something wet and curious, something with motion and memory. It would be millions of years before anything swam, billions before anything walked, but already the journey had begun. Already a planet had softened its edges. Already the oceans were waiting. Imagine the quiet of that time, the vast blue silence, the warm breath of vents rising through salt water, the steady spin of a planet just learning to balance. You can almost hear it if you listen through the noise of now. That first world was not built for humans. It was not even built for animals. It was a world of minerals and patience, of slow heat and longer stillness, rains. Some of the atoms in your bones were once in those newborn vents. That is how Earth began, with a bang, but with a soft assembling of silence. Dust turning to stone, stone turning to sea, and sea whispering toward the miracle of life. And though we live in houses and drive on roads and look at screens, our story is still that story. The story of dust that dreamed of oceans, of molecules that hummed with memory, of a planet that turned chaos into calm. Let us drift deeper now into the warmth of that ancient sea where sunlight fell in long, trembling ribbons, and the waves spoke only in rhythms older than sound. Life, in its earliest forms, was still just a suggestion, a flicker of repetition in a fluid world. Tiny loops of molecules continued their soft dance, held by membranes like soap bubbles, clinging to rocks, floating in currents, and every so often surviving just long enough to divide. They were not aware, not thinking, not reaching, but they endured. They learned to take in energy, to use the light that spilled into the sea or the chemicals that welled up from beneath. Slowly, new pathways emerged, ways to build, to break down, to grow. Some cells began to join with others, forming colonies, communities, simple yet purposeful gatherings, and the oceans watched. They held this delicate theater with care, like a mother cradling a breathless infant. With time, cells developed a quiet talent, photosynthesis. They learned to sip sunlight and turn it into energy. These tiny green architects were cyanobacteria, and they breathed out something strange: oxygen. At first, oxygen was unwelcome, a sharp and reactive gas that startled the ocean's chemistry. It rusted iron and upset the careful balance of the sea, but the earth adapted. The iron sank, forming beds of red rock. The oxygen began to linger, dissolving into the ocean, then creeping upward into the sky. The atmosphere changed color, tone, texture, and over eons, a miracle began. The sky turned blue. A thin film of oxygen wrapped the earth like a sigh. This was the breath of the planet, the first long inhale of something more than survival. Now the world had air that could someday hold birds, fuel fire, carry song. Beneath it, life continued to unfurl like a fern in slow motion. Developed nuclei, organelles, tiny engines, and walls. These were the eukaryotes, ancestors of every tree, every bird, every human, and their arrival was like a whisper of tomorrow. Some began to move not by wind or current, but by choice. They had tiny tails, cilia, or spirals that spun, and they explored the sea's gentle landscape, from sunlight shallows to the ink-dark deep. Others formed alliances, joining together into organisms made of many cells, cooperating like villages of intent. And in this shared striving life began to specialize. Some cells built structure, some processed energy, some communicated with pulses of chemistry. It was a kind of silent language, spoken not with words, but with functions and form. In the shallows, mats of microbes formed thick, living carpets. Time passed, uncounted, in the rhythm of tides and tectonics. Continents shifted beneath the sea like slow giants, stretching. Volcanoes rose and fell. The moon pulled softly on the tides, stirring the oceans like a spoon in tea. And life adapted. It shaped itself to the currents, the heat, the shadows. It grew armor, spines, symmetry. It learned to see, to feel, to respond. Eyes emerge, simple at first, just pits that sensed light. But eventually, lenses and nerves formed, and creatures could follow brightness, seek shelter, hunt. The ocean, once blind, now shimmered with awareness. And in that clarity, life exploded. Coral reefs began to bloom like underwater forests. Fish evolved, their bodies sleek and glittering, their gills filtering breath from water. Shells spiraled, tentacles reached, fins waved like flags in a current. Earth was no longer a quiet cradle. It had become a symphony of motion, color, and form. And yet, all of it still traced back to dust, to molecules that dared to bond, to patterns that dared to persist. The ocean had become a memory keeper, each drop carrying the echo of billions of choices, mutations, and mysteries. Above, the atmosphere thickened and shimmered, touched by the breath of forests yet to form. Rain fell in steady patterns. Rivers began carving the land, and the crust of the earth cracked and danced, forming mountains, valleys, and basins. Life, always adjusting, crept from water onto damp shorelines. Algae clung to rocks. Worms squirmed through mud, and the earth made room. Slowly, plants emerge, small, mossy, clinging things that grew toward the light. They spread across land like ink in paper, drawing life outward. They softened stone into soil. They breathed out more oxygen, shaping the sky with every breath. The land became green, and with green came animals. Insects buzzed and crawled. Amphibians flopped from water to earth. Reptiles followed, sunning themselves on warm rock. And the world grew louder, not with noise, but with purpose. Wings beat, eyes blinked. Evolution sculpted life like a patient artist over brushstroke millennia. And even now, deep in our marrow, we carry that timeline. The minerals in our bones match the rocks. The salt in our blood matches the sea. The oxygen in our lungs is a gift from leaves, and the light in our eyes is born from the same fusion that first forged the stars. We are Earth's memory, walking. Every heartbeat is a rhythm older than speech. Every breath is a sharing with the sky. In the patterns of our cells, the logic of life is still written in that soft, patient language that began in the ocean's cradle. We are not separate from Earth. We are the Earth. Awakened now, imagine the Earth as it continued to turn, slow and steady, carrying its memories forward through time. Its crust shifting under the weight of forests, its oceans rising and falling like breath. Life had spilled across the land, woven itself into vines and fur, feathers and bark. It had learned to crawl, to walk, to climb, to fly. And from the long line of creatures that had bloomed and vanished, one small branch began to wonder. This branch stood upright and blinked at the sky. It made tools from stone and fire from friction, from the soft mud of rivers and the shadows of trees. Early humans emerged. They were curious, and their curiosity lit up like sparks across the world. First whispers of memory made visible. Though their voices were new, the elements that made them were ancient. Their bodies were still shaped from stardust. Their blood still carried the sea. They built with the bones of mountains, shaped metal from Earth's hidden ores, carved caves into cliffs. They named things: river, flame, wind, home, and in naming they began to change the world. They painted on stone walls with ochre and ash, drawing animals and hands, symbols of life and longing. These were not just pictures, they were echoes of attention, gentle marks left by minds that remembered. As humans walked across continents, they brought the earth with them in every step. They carried seeds and fire, dreams and tools. They turned soil into gardens, rivers into lifelines, and the earth, ever responsive, adapted in kind. Forests gave way to fields. Wolves became dogs. Wild grains became golden harvests. In time, cities rose clusters of stone and breath and will. People built homes, temples, pathways that threaded through valleys and across deserts. And though it looked like something new, it was still earth rearranged. The bricks were still made of clay, the beams still grown from trees, the people still born of molecules shaped by time. Civilization, as it unfurled, was simply a new layer of the same old rhythm. The planets still spun, the tides still moved, and in quiet corners of those cities, people still gazed up, wondering at stars, asking the same questions the sky had always whispered. They studied the movement of shadows, the cycles of the moon, the fall of apples, the spark of thought. Science emerged not as something separate, but as a way of listening more carefully to what the world had always said. The earth had left clues in its layers, fossils in stone, pollen in mud, echoes in ice. They began to understand how everything was connected, how a butterfly's wing and a mountain's birth were both written in the same quiet language of matter and time. And as knowledge grew, so too did reflection. People asked where they came from, not just in story, but in structure. They learned that their hands held the same atoms as the stars, that the iron in their blood had once flared inside suns, that every breath they took was part of a cycle older than memory, and this knowing brought a quiet reverence. The earth, once feared or conquered, became something to marvel at again. Its forests became lungs, its oceans became hearts, its clouds became breath. People began to see that they did not stand above the earth, but within it, that their cities, their cultures, their songs were simply one part of a much older harmony. In that soft understanding, a kind of peace waited. Not the peace of silence, but the peace of belonging. To know that the water in your tea was once rain in a fern, once a glacier, once vapor drifting through the early sky. To know that your thoughts, your feelings, your dreams are born from patterns shaped billions of years ago by oceans and heat and time. This is not just science, it is a lullaby. It is the earth singing you back to yourself. And so the story continues. We walk on sidewalks, but beneath them are roots. We read from screens, but our thoughts are still sparked by electricity born in the body. We build machines, but their circuits carry the same flow as rivers. And the earth, generous and wide, still holds us close, still spins beneath us, still turns its face toward the sun. We are not separate from its story. We are a continuation, a remembering, a soft whisper that began in fire and silence, and now speaks in heartbeat and breath. And when we forget, the earth reminds us not with words, but with waves and wind, and the scent of soil after rain. From dust to ocean, from sea to sky, from breath to thought, this is the story of Earth, told not in pages, but in patience. And tonight, as you sleep, the world will keep spinning, the tides will keep singing, and the dust that once drifted quietly in space will keep dreaming through you. Beneath the hush of grass and the weight of mountains lies a sky turned inward, a hidden firmament made not of clouds but of stone, pressed and layered in slow whispers over eons. We often walk on earth without seeing it, without feeling the deep story it holds under every footstep. But if you were to lie down, close your eyes, and listen with the bones of your body, you might begin to hear it, the slow settling of ancient ash, the silent drift of silt becoming stone, the secret breath of roots threading through dark. This is the crust of the earth, not the solid certainty, it seems, but a floating shell, cracked and drifting on rivers of molten rock. These tectonic plates are the earth's gentle shifters, slow dancers in a choreography of continents. They carry whole lands upon their backs, mountains, cities, forests, sand. Though they move at the pace of fingernails growing, they carry the power to raise oceans and shatter empires. Long ago, when the planet was young, its surface was softer, glowing, a lava skin rippling beneath a young star. Over time, this surface cooled, solidified, but never stopped moving. Cracks formed lines of weakness that became boundaries. These were the first outlines of continents, floating islands of rock, separated by seams of molten fire. As they drifted, collided, and parted, they shaped the very geography of life. Imagine the first landmass, Pangaea, vast and quiet, wrapped in thick clouds, surrounded by endless sea. Slowly, it began to break, not with violence, but with tension stretched over millions of years. A crack here, a slow pull there. What was once one became many, and as the plates drifted, they carried ecosystems with them, species stranded on islands, climates transformed, rainforests where once there were deserts. This movement beneath our feet is still happening. It has never stopped. The Himalayas rise ever so slightly with each year, born from India's slow collision with Asia. The Atlantic widens, a gentle exhale between continents. And under the sea, ridges glow faintly where new crust is born, magma rising to stitch the planet's skin anew. But the crust is not just movement, it is memory. Every layer tells a story. Sand becomes sandstone. Mud becomes shale. Volcanic ash becomes tuff. Fossils lie hidden like pressed flowers, recording the echo of creatures that once breathed, walked, sang. You can read the earth like a book if you know how to see. A red streak means iron. A ripple means water once flowed. A fold means pressure. A collision, a reshaping. It churns not with flame but with pressure, its iron heart spinning, sending magnetic fields outward to shield us from solar wind. Our compasses align because of it. Our auroras glow because of it. Deep within, The earth remembers the time before surface, before breath, before sky. But let us return to the crust, to the places we touch. Soil is not just dirt, is the skin of time. A handful of soil holds minerals from mountains, carbon from once living trees, water that has cycled through clouds, roots, rivers. It holds the memory of ice ages, of fire, of footsteps long vanished. Beneath forests, soil thickens with decay and life, a living library where fungi thread like veins and insects churn history into food. In deserts, it is thinner, fragile, holding only the salt, trace whispers of rain. We call it ground, but it is never still. Every earthquake is a reminder, every volcano a breath. The earth speaks in tremors, in shifts, in the cracking of stone. But it also speaks in silence, in the slow uplift of land, in the tilt of a hill, in the curve of a canyon. The Grand Canyon itself is not a wound, but a sentence written in rock, carved by water, read by wind. And we, humans, are children of this crust. Our shelters are carved from its stone. Our metals are mined from its depths. Our bodies need the minerals. It offers iron for blood, calcium for bones, potassium for nerves. We are not only shaped by the ground beneath us, we are made of it. And yet we forget. We pave it. We cover it with concrete. We scrape it, dig it, shift it. But the earth does not hold resentment. It simply continues. Beneath every city lies the same patient stone, the same shifting plates, the same slow heartbeat. And when we pause, even briefly, to feel the warmth of sun on a rock, the crunch of gravel beneath our feet, the smell of rain on soil we remember, we belong to something older, something steady, something that moves so slowly we mistake it for stillness. But it is always moving. The sky, we think, is above. But truly, there is a sky beneath our feet, a place of upward motion and downward pull, of drift and pressure and memory. A place where the planet's deepest thoughts unfold without words. And as we walk, we are carried by it, shaped by it, held by it. The ground beneath us is not just where we stand. It is where we began. Let us go deeper now, not downward, but inward, into the slow thoughts of the earth, into the hidden layers where time becomes stone and stone becomes memory. Beneath our feet, far below where roots can reach or drills can bite, the earth stretches into zones of pressure and transformation. Rocks that were once soft sediments are pressed and folded until they harden into mountains beneath mountains. These are the metamorphic rocks, shaped by heat and force, whispering stories of collision and change. Some contain crystals that shimmer in light, forged over millennia by temperature and tension. Others hold the ghosts of shells and leaves, flattened into patterns like forgotten dreams. Every stone is a sentence, and every mountain a chapter. And still, all of this rides upon the mantle, a layer of semi-solid rock that flows ever so slowly, carrying the crust like ice on a warm river. The mantle doesn't burn, but it glows, always shifting. Its convection currents are like great, lazy spirals, lifting heat upward and pulling coolness down, driving the slow drift of continents and the rise of volcanoes. At the boundaries of plates, where one slab slides beneath another or tears away from its twin, there are scenes of motion, creation, and destruction. These are the birthplaces of mountains, trenches, and earthquakes. They remind us that the earth is not still, not ever. It breathes in geologic time, its chest rising and falling in millions of years. And though we live our lives in hours and days, the pulse of the planet continues beneath us, unaware of clocks or calendars. Consider the Andes, rising from the west coast of South America like a spine pressed upward from below. They are young in geological terms, still growing, still trembling. Clouds cling to their peaks, glaciers sleep on their backs. And yet they were born of subduction, one plate diving beneath another, melting, erupting, lifting land into the sky. And what of Iceland, where the mid-Atlantic ridge surfaces, spilling lava in slow waves that cool into basalt plains? There the crust is still being written, fresh stone laid down like ink from the earth's core. Even the Hawaiian Islands, scattered like beads across the Pacific, are the breathmarks of a hotspot, fixed heat pushing upward as the plate above drifts westward, leaving behind a trail of volcanic footprints. But it is not only the places where plates meet that matter. The centers of continents, the old, stable cratons, tell another tale. These are the ancient hearts of land, unmoved for billions of years, layered with sediment and shielded by time. Beneath Canada, beneath parts of Africa and Australia, these shields hold the oldest rocks on Earth, some as old as 4 billion years, nearly as old as the planet itself. They are quiet places, geologically speaking, but they hold the wisdom of the beginning, the calm after the fire, the stillness that follows chaos. And the soil above them, built from erosion and decay, feeds forests and prairies, holds the footprints of animals and the seeds of trees. The crust and the soil are not separate, they are threads in the same cloth. Rain falls, rivers carve, wind scours, and slowly mountains crumble into hills, into plains, into the soft, dark earth we touch with our fingers. It is a circle, not of time alone, but of form, rock to dust, dust to clay, clay to life. Trees take in the minerals once trapped in granite. Grasses grow on ground once buried beneath oceans. Even our bodies participate. When we return to the earth, we nourish it, become part of it once again. But perhaps the most humbling part of all is this: the ground we walk on is not fixed, it is not permanent. Over deep time, the continents drift and rearrange. What was once ocean becomes mountain. What was once jungle becomes desert. Antarctica, now frozen and white, was once green with forests, home to rivers and ferns. And it may be again. Nothing stays, and yet nothing is lost. The sky beneath our feet is a mirror of the sky above, a vast, shifting canvas of movement and memory. The clouds change shape just as the crust folds and breaks. The stars drift across the sky just as continents slide across the mantle. The wind whispers, and so does the earth, only more slowly, more deeply. And just as we find comfort in constellations, we can find grounding in geology. To know that beneath the pavement and pasture lies a world in motion. To feel that even stillness is a kind of dance. This is not just knowledge, it is belonging. The earth is not only our home, it is our history, our cradle, our body. Its stones are in our walls and in our bones. Its dust settles on our shelves and in our veins. We are not simply on the earth, we are of it. And when we forget, the ground reminds us, not with words, but with warmth, with weight, with the steady presence that holds us always. So the next time you lie in the grass, press your hand to the soil and feel beneath the roots. Imagine the plates drifting, the magma churning, the crystals forming. Imagine the quiet, vast patience that built the mountains and carried the seas. And know, without question, that you are held, that beneath every field and forest, every city and shore, there is a sky of stone and fire, a slow miracle unfolding beneath your feet. Let us now return gently to the surface, not in haste but in reverence, carrying with us the quiet knowledge of what lies below the shifting plates, the glowing mantle, the ancient stones pressed into memory. Above ground, life continues in its many forms, walking unknowingly atop these slow tectonic dreams. Children run across playgrounds built on layers of compacted shells. Cities hum with movement atop faults and folds older than language. Forests root themselves into forgotten lava flows, and rivers carve paths through sandstone laid down in ancient seas. Everywhere we look, the ground is telling a story, not loud, not urgent, but always there, murmuring under our steps. Even our smallest gestures are part of this geologic song. When we plant a tree, its roots explore the layers of clay and gravel, pushing gently into the past. When we build, we anchor into bedrock, trusting that what formed over millennia will hold for centuries. When we dig, we uncover pottery, bones, fragments of time nestled between grains of soil. And when we paused, truly pause, and place our hand on the ground, we touch more than matter. We touch the echoes of fire, flood, frost, and formation. We touch the earth's slow breath. In some places, the crust stretches thin, revealing its warmth in the form of geysers and hot springs. These are the Earth's exhalations, where steam and minerals rise from deep within, painting rocks with bright colors and filling the air with the scent of stone and heat. In other places, faults slip and the ground trembles. These earthquakes remind us, often abruptly, that stillness is an illusion. Yet even these movements are part of a greater balancy planet, reshaping itself, not with malice, but with memory. Volcanic eruptions, too, are not acts of anger, but acts of creation. From their molten mouths come new land, fertile soil, and the raw ingredients for life to begin again. Every continent bears the fingerprints of these past eruptions. Islands in the Pacific, valleys in Africa, even the soft, rolling hills of Europe, all shaped, at some time, by fire from below. And within those fires, the earth renews itself. Lava cools into basalt, into fertile black earth, into the very ground where forests will someday grow. The cycle is never ending, always returning to creation, always inviting renewal. And just as mountains rise, they also fall. Erosion, slow and patient, wears them down grain by grain. Rain becomes river. Maconich River holds the history of entire peoples. Cultures have risen beside them, shaped by their floods, their droughts, their bends. Languages formed in rhythm with their tides. Songs were written to match their flow. Even today, people gather at riverbanks to pray, to wash, to celebrate, to mourn. The river bears witness to it all. It has no preference. It accepts joy and sorrow alike, and it carries both away with equal softness. And beneath the surface, unseen, is a whole other world. In the sediment-rich shallows, creatures, burrow worms, mollusks, insects creating tiny homes and paths. Fish flicker through pools and rapids, their scales catching glimpses of light. Frogs sing in the dusk, calling to one another across the echoing water. And deeper still, the river carries chemicals, signals, nutrients. It speaks in a silent language of pH and salinity, temperature and flow rate, oxygen and carbon. To understand a river is to understand an orchestra of elements playing at once, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in tension, always in motion. And above the river, clouds gather, trees lean in, animals follow, even humans, with their bridges and dams, their canals and levees, cannot truly stop the river. We try to contain it, to guide it, to divert its path, but the river remembers its old ways. Given time, it will return to them. A channel redirected may one day overflow. A delta narrowed may one day expand. Water finds its way. It always does, and there is a kind of mercy in that. The persistence of rivers is not about defiance. It is about returning to what works, returning to gravity, to the shape of the land, to the soft pull of the sea. A river is not rushing toward an end. It is completing a journey. And along the way, it nourishes, it listens, it shapes, and sometimes it rests in wetlands and oxbows, in still ponds and meanders. The river pauses. Here, life takes refuge. Birds nest in cattails. Fish spawn in shallow pools. Insects dance over still surfaces. The water slows, but it does not stop. Even in rest, the river moves. Even in silence, it speaks. And it is here, perhaps, in these quiet turns, that we come closest to understanding it, not with our eyes, but with our breath. The river teaches not only movement, but patience, not only direction, but pause, and in its endless remembering, it teaches us something of ourselves. In the hush of a morning forest, before the birds begin to sing, and the wind starts to stir the branches, there is a breath that has no sound, no scent, no voice, and yet it fills the world. It rises from moss and fern, from the tops of trembling trees and the smallest blades of grass. It drifts from leaves curled open to the sun and stems bent low in shadow. This breath is not made by lungs, not drawn from air the way animals do. It is the exhale of green things, the whisper of photosynthesis, the ancient, quiet miracle that turned a barren planet into a living world. Long before voices, before animals wandered the land or insects flew beneath clouds, there were only the plants rising from the rocks like soft thoughts, drawing in sunlight and breathing out life. It began in the sea, as most things did. Tiny cyanobacteria floating in warm shallows began to capture light. They used it to build themselves, to store energy, and in doing so, they released oxygen, an invisible sigh, into the water. Slowly, over millions of years, the oceans filled with this new reactive gas, and then the sky, the atmosphere changed, became richer, more complex. And in time, plants emerged, first simple, then wondrously diverse, each one quietly working in partnership with light. They spread across the continents like a green tide, climbing stone, carpeting soil, softening the sharpness of the world. They did not move quickly, did not hunt or flee, but they endured, and in that stillness, they transformed everything. To understand a plant is to understand patience. A seed waits in the dark, sometimes for years, until the signal comes: moisture, warmth, the slight loosening of soil. Then, without sound, it sends out a root, seeking downward, and a shoot, reaching upward. It knows, without knowing, that light is above and that water is below. It unfolds itself into the world, not with speed, but with trust. Each leaf it grows becomes a panel for sunlight. Each cell within that leaf a tiny laboratory. Inside, chloroplast screen, lens-shaped organelles harvest photons. They take in carbon dioxide from the air and water from the roots and use light to rearrange them into sugar and oxygen. This is photosynthesis, the great alchemy of green life, the quiet forge in which sunlight becomes substance, where air becomes energy, where plants become the lungs of the world. Every tree, every vine, every blade of grass participates in this work. They do not speak, but they breathe, and with every breath they shape the sky. It is estimated that more than half of the oxygen we breathe comes not from forests, but from tiny marine plants, phytoplankton, floating near the ocean's surface, dancing with the waves, blooming and fading with the seasons. These microscopic beings, though unseen, offer the world its first and deepest breath. On land, forests echo this process, their canopies catching light, their roots drawing water, their branches holding space for life. A single mature tree can produce enough oxygen for 2 people to breathe each day. A forest, then, is not just a collection of trees, it is a breathing organism, a collective intelligence, a harmony of green. And what they give, they do not take back. The oxygen released floats upward, mixes into the atmosphere, and becomes the invisible gift we rarely notice until it is gone. And the sugar made in their leaves travels downward, through a quiet plumbing of phloem tubes, to feed roots, fruits, flowers. Plants share their energy, not only with themselves, but with the world. They feed herbivores, insects, birds. Their fruits nourish, their roots anchor. Their flowers invite pollinators in an elegant exchange of color and nectar. Even in death, plants return their gift leaves, falling to become soil, trunks decomposing into humus, seeds scattering to begin again. There is no waste, only return, only cycle, and all of it begins with a breath. The breath of green things. Walk through a meadow in early morning and you can feel it. The air is thick with unseen offerings. The plants have been breathing all night, storing light from the previous day, and now, as the sun rises, they awaken again. Their stome-potta tiny pores on the undersides of leaves open to take in carbon dioxide. Water evaporates gently through them, cooling the leaf, pulling nutrients upward from the soil in a graceful current called transpiration. This flow is not random, it is pulsed, guided, regulated by sunlight, humidity, and internal signals. The whole plant is alive with movement, though you cannot see it. Leaves turn ever so slowly to track the sun. Flowers open and close. Vines reach, tendrils curl, roots explore. It is a world of silent action happening just beyond our normal pace of seeing. And within this still life, so much is happening. Plants communicate not with words, but with chemicals. A tree attacked by insects may release volatile compounds that warn its neighbors. A root sensing drought may shift its growth, seeking deeper moisture. Fungi living in symbiosis with roots form vast underground networks, carrying signals, sharing nutrients kind of woodland internet known as the mycorrhizal network. Through it, trees of different species exchange carbon and information, helping one another survive. It is not competition alone that governs the plant world, it is cooperation, resilience, mutual care. The breath of green things is not only oxygen, it is presence, it is balance. It is the slow, kind heartbeat of the planet. And as we breathe in what plants release, we become part of their story. Every inhale we take is an embrace. Every exhale is a return. We are not separate from the forest. We are in dialogue with it, always, through our breath. Let us now step deeper into the shade of that breath, into the quiet world where green life not only builds itself from light, but weaves together the rhythms of everything that lives beside it. For plants do not simply exist, they shape the very conditions that allow existence. A forest is not just a group of trees, but a microclimate, a breathing structure that catches water from the air and gives it back to the ground. Its canopy softens sunlight into dappled gold. Its roots anchor soil against erosion. Its leaves release moisture that gathers as mist, feeds clouds, returns as rain. In the Amazon, it is said that trees create their own weather, drawing moisture from thousands of miles and sending it skyward again in great invisible rivers of vapor. In temperate woodlands, fallen leaves form thick carpets that shelter beetles, fungi, tiny seeds waiting to rise. In alpine meadows, hardy mosses and lichens cling to stone, breaking it down grain by grain into future soil. Even the smallest blade of grass, waving in a forgotten field, contributes to the dance of carbon and air. Plants are everywhere, and in their stillness, they are always at work. Their lives unfold in spirals and circles, unfurling from buds, in patterns that follow the golden ratio, branching in symmetry that echoes rivers, lungs, galaxies. A sunflower arranges its seeds in Fibonacci spirals, not because it knows math, but because that pattern allows for the most efficient packing of life. A tree's limbs spread to catch light without shadowing one another. Ivy climbs by sensing the texture of walls. This is not intention as we understand it. It is design shaped by millions of years of gentle experiment, by nature listening to itself over time. And we too are drawn to this language. We find peace beneath trees, not only because they shade us, but because they mirror something essential inside ooze growth from stillness, strength from flexibility, giving without demand. In the deserts, plants adapt by retreating inward, store water, open their pores only at night, grow low to avoid the scalding sun. In wetlands, reeds grow tall and hollow, swaying with the tides, offering homes to herons and frogs. In the tundra, lichens and mosses huddle close to the ground, surviving where roots cannot dig deep. Each ecosystem holds its own form of breath, its own cadence, shaped by the plants that live there. Even in cities, where soil is paved and air, they reclaim forgotten places. They reach even when no one watches, and they do more than provide beauty. They clean the air, filter water, absorb heat. These are not small gifts. They are constant, invisible blessings. And still, we often forget. We walk past trees without knowing their names. We trim hedges and mow lawns without hearing their song. But plants do not mind. They continue. They do not require attention to give. that the chlorophyll in a leaf is a cousin to the hemoglobin in our blood. And inside that circle, there are stories still unfolding. There are trees older than cities, standing watch over centuries of change. There are seeds buried in Arctic permafrost, still viable after tens of thousands of years. There are forests that speak in chemicals, responding to insect attacks by summoning predators to their defense. There are flowers that mimic the scent and shape of insects to draw pollinators in. There are vines that twist toward sound, roots that follow water, leaves that shift in response to touch. All of it quiet, all of it profound, and it continues whether we notice or not. Photosynthesis itself, the great breath of green things, still pulses in every moment of daylight. Sunlight strikes a leaf. Electrons are excited. Water is split. Oxygen escapes. Sugar is formed. And in that process, the world turns. Without it, there would be no food chain, no energy flow, no life as we know it. It is the foundation beneath everything we build. And yet, it is easy to forget, because it is so gentle, so constant. But perhaps that is the lesson, that the most powerful forces are often the quietest, that strength does not always shout, that healing can happen in stillness. They show us how to live with patience, how to grow toward light even when buried. In shadow, they show us how to root deeply and yet remain flexible, how to give without depletion, how to die and return as nourishment for others. In autumn, when leaves turn amber and fall, it is not an end, but a preparation. The tree withdraws its energy, stores it in the roots, rests until spring. Even in dormancy, it is alive. Even in sleep, it breathes. And so, when we walk through a forest, when we pass a meadow, when we tend a garden or cradle a potted sprout on a windowsill, we are breathing together. We are remembering the long, green breath that began long before us and will continue long after we are gone. Now let us return to the breath we first noticed in the stillness of morning, the quiet exhale of the green. This breath has never ceased. It moves through jungles thick with heat and vines, through pine forests brushing mountain clouds, through grassy plains shimmering in the hush of dusk. It drifts across wetlands where lilies float and reeds sway, through farmlands golden with grain, through gardens tucked behind homes where lavender hums with bees. It moves even through the air around you now, silent, invisible, and yet utterly essential. They do not seek applause, but they continue their patient work, the work of making life from light, of turning sun into sugar, of transforming what is spent into something new. Even as cities grow, and forests are cleared, and green retreats beneath pavement and smoke, plants endure. In cracks, in corners, in forgotten fields, they rise again. Plants are reminders that life desires to continue. They show us that resilience can be quiet, that change can be slow and still be real. And as we change the world with our machines and structures, the breath of green things continues beneath it all, holding the balance, giving us a chance to remember what it means to belong. Scientists study how they signal to one another, how they grow differently in response to sound, how they store memories in the way a leaf reacts more quickly to a second injury. Philosophers speak of plant intelligence, not as thought in the human sense, but as a deep, embodied wisdom, a knowing, written in form, in time, in gesture. Indigenous traditions have known this for generations. They have walked the woods, not as visitors, but as relatives, speaking to trees, thanking berries, offering song to the soil. To them, the breath of green things is sacred, not separate from spirit, but interwoven with it. And perhaps, slowly, we are learning again in schools. Children plant seeds in cups and watch with wonder as tiny shoots emerge. In cities, people grow herbs on balconies, their hands remembering what it means to care for something rooted. We are coming back not to dominate, but to listen, not to own, but to witness, in the scent of pine, in the way morning glories bloom with the dawn. It is in the way trees lean into the sun and vines reach toward warmth and flowers turn their faces to the sky. It is in the food we eat, the shelter we build, the medicine we hold in our hands. Even the paper on which words are printed is the gift of a tree's body. We are surrounded, supported, sustained, and in this awareness, a gentle gratitude begins. To grow, the world, it seems, is always giving, and green things are the messengers of that gift. They are the breath made visible, the lungs of the earth, the soft keepers of balance. Even in a single blade of grass, the entire miracle of photosynthesis unfolds. Again and again, day after day, asking for nothing, offering everything. So when you next find yourself near a tree, or walking through a park, or brushing against wild mint on a path, breathe deeply. Feel how the air enters your lungs, air that may have passed through 1,000 leaves, through forests and fields, through unseen gardens. Let it remind you that breath is not a private act, it is a shared one. It is a bridge between you and the rest of life. And though we often move too fast to notice, the green world moves with us, supporting each step, cleaning each breath, wrapping the earth in a cloak of light and shadow. Even at night, when the leaves close and photosynthesis sleeps, the roots keep working, drawing in water, listening to the soil. And in the morning, it begins again. The sun rises, light returns, and the plants, faithful and tireless, begin to breathe. In their breath is the memory of stars. In their breath is the promise of balance. And in their breath is the quiet invitation to join, to slow down, to soften, to grow toward the light. The breath of green things is not just the story of plants. It is the story of life itself, quietly unfolding beneath our notice, patiently holding space for all that we are and all that we might become, high above the clouds where the air thins and silence stretches wide. The mountains stand like ancient sentinels, their peaks etched by wind and time, their shadows stretching over valleys and rivers, forests and fields. They seem immovable, timeless, carved once and left untouched. But beneath their stillness lies a secret. The mountains move, they grow, they bend, they breathe in the deep language of stone. To the hurried eye, they are permanent, but to the that a single centimeter gained in a year is a miracle of momentum. The Himalayas, jagged and snow-laced, continue to rise each year as India presses into Asia, like two ancient bodies leaning into one another. The Andes stretch along the spine of South America, formed where oceanic crust slips beneath land, folding Earth's skin-like fabric. Even the quiet Appalachians, rounded by time and softened by rain, were once as tall and sharp as any range built by the clash of long-forgotten plates. These bones of the mountain, the rock beneath the forest, tell a story not of sudden birth, but of pressure. Stone that was once sand, once mud, once coral reef, is now marble, granite, schist. The weight of the world presses down, transforms. Heat from the mantle seeps upward. Crystals form, layers buckle, and the mountains rise, pulled upward by invisible hands. They are born in violence, but they stand in peace. Even now, as we walk, their trails, their slopes, are still moving slowly, deeply, invisibly. Landslides, earthquakes, the long erosion of wind and rainfall are part of their breathing. And with each shift, the mountains reveal their history. A fossil here, pressed into shale, tells of a time when this stone was seafloor. A vein of quartz, running like frost through granite, tells of cooling magma. A jagged outcrop at the peak tells of rock once buried miles below. These are the pages of Earth's book, turned by ice and gravity. And the story they tell is not only of stone, but of time. Mountains measure time differently, not in minutes or years, but in ages. They watch the slow rise and fall of glaciers. They feel the quiet drift of continents. They cradle lakes formed from the melting of ancient ice lakes that shimmer in their high basins like tears caught in a palm, and they hold within them the dust of stars. The elements that make up mountains, iron, silicon, calcium, were born in supernova, scattered across space, gathered into this planet and forged in its depths. So when you place your hand on a boulder or lean against a cliff face, you are touching the memory of stars, the cooled breath of fire, the settled weight of time. Life, too, finds a home in the bones of the mountain. Moss creeps across stone, finding moisture in cracks. Lichens etch slow graffiti into granite, living centuries without moving more than a few inches. Goats climb impossibly steep cliffs, hooves balanced on ledges no wider than thought. Birds nest in crevices. Alpine flowers bloom in short, fierce bursts of color, painting the slopes for a moment before vanishing into the next season. And people, too, are drawn to these heights. For thousands of years, mountains have been places of pilgrimage, of mystery, of prayer. Their peaks have been seen as thrones of gods, as stairways to the sky. We build temples on their ledges, carve paths through their passes, watch the sunrise from their summits, and feel, if only for a breath, that we are close to something vast and eternal. And yet the mountains remain themselves, unchanged by worship, unchanged by praise. They stand not to be seen, but simply because they must. Because the earth's crust is restless, because heat rises, because pressure builds. The mountain does not know it is beautiful. It does not know it is feared. It simply is. And in that being, it offers something rarer, chance to remember what endures. Climbing a mountain is not only a journey through space, but through time. Every step upward takes you back, layer by layer, into deeper epochs. The rocks near the summit may be older than those below, uplifted from ancient depths. The air thins, but your sense of scale expands. You feel how small you are, and yet how connected. The wind on your face has passed over continents. The stone beneath your feet once lay beneath oceans. The silence around you is the same silence that filled the world before words. And as you breathe that thin, cold air, you become part of the mountain's moment, folded into its long exhale. The bones of the mountain do not break easily, but they do wear down. Water freezes in cracks and expands, breaking stone. Plants root in fissures, pry them wider. Rain carries away dust, drop by drop. Time does its work, gently but surely. Peaks crumble, valleys fill, and what rose will one day fall. But even in that falling, there is grace. The dust becomes soil. The soil feeds trees. The trees shade. Rivers. The rivers carve again into stone. And the mountain, once towering, becomes hill, becomes plain, becomes memory. In this way, the mountains never leave. They only change shape. And the bones beneath remain, holding the weight of everything that comes after. Let us descend now into the deeper stories. The mountain holds not just in height, but in depth, in the hidden folds beneath its roots, where pressure sculpts and heat reshapes, where stone remembers movements so old they no longer have names. Beneath every mountain lies a complex foundation, a shifting mosaic of crustal plates and buried memories, each layer a record of ancient seas, volcanic eruptions, or drifting sediments that once fell like dust through prehistoric water. Over time, these layers were compressed, folded, tilted upward into spines of rock that cracked the sky. It is not one event that builds a mountain, but thousands. It is not a single force, but a slow conversation between the Earth's core and its skin, between gravity and uplift, between cooling and pressure. Some mountains rise where plates converge, pushing one beneath the other, creating arcs of fire where magma reaches the surface. Others form where plates slide past, crumpling the crust like cloth. Still others are born in the quiet middle of a plate over hotspots where mantle plumes rise like warm breath, building volcanic peaks in the midst of ocean or plain. Each mountain tells a different tale, and all are written in stone. Look closely at a mountain face, and you'll see line strata bending like waves, frozen in time. Veins of quartz threading through darker rock, faults where the earth split and shifted. These are not flaws, they are signatures. And within them lie the minerals that make our world: feldspar, mica, olivine, the crystals that shape sand, the elements that harden into steel or shimmer into gems. Mountains are more than elevations. They are repositories. They hold ore and ice, water and wind. They collect snow in winter, and in spring they release it, feeding rivers that rush down their flanks into thirsty lands. A single mountain can sustain entire regions. It draws moisture from the sky, shapes local weather, stores fresh water in frozen peaks, and even in the most arid ranges, mountain springs bubble from deep within, cool and clear, reminders that the earth still gives. And what it gives is not only physical. There is a kind of clarity that comes from standing in the presence of mountains, not because they offer answers, but because they ask nothing of us. Their patience is complete. They do not hurry. They do not explain. They simply remain. And in their stillness, we are invited to listen to our breath, to the hush between words, to the smallness that does not mean insignificance, but belonging. For in the bones of the mountain, we find reflections of ourselves. Our bones, too, are shaped by pressure and time. They hold us upright. They carry our stories. They bear the marks of movement and stillness, of endurance and breakage. And like the mountain, we change, we weather, we erode, but we also grow strong. We climb, not just in motion, but in spirit, drawn upward by something we do not always name. There is a reason people climb mountains, not to conquer, but to be changed. The path up is never just a trail. It is a mirror, a challenge, a whisper of who we might be if we learned to move slowly, to endure. Along the way, there are moments of stillness, the scent of pine, the crunch of gravel, the sudden flutter of wings as a bird takes flight, the glimpse of a distant ridge, sunlit and golden. These are not interruptions. They are the mountain speaking. They are the landscape reminding us to look, to pause, to belong. At higher elevations, the air grows thin, and with it, thought becomes clear. The world narrows into breath and step, heartbeat and stone. The mind, usually busy with noise, falls silent, listening at last to the body's rhythm. Here, among cliffs and clouds, we meet a different kind of knowledge, not made of words or data, but of presence. It is here that stories become simple. The wind speaks in a language older than sound. The stone holds memory without voice, and we, wrapped in coats and awe, breathe in the same air that moved through this place 1,000 years ago. Beneath our feet are fossils of coral that lived when this mountain was under sea. Above us, hawks circle in thermals, watching the same valleys that once held glaciers. Around us, the rocks shed tiny crystals with each freeze and thaw, each crack and rain. And so the mountain reshapes itself, slowly, gently. It does not resist change. It allows it. It lets the wind carve. It lets the snow melt. It lets time do what time must do. And in that, it shows us how to endure, not by holding rigid, but by allowing transformation to come. The bones of the mountain shift not because they are weak, but because they are alive to the forces that surround them. And this is their strength. This is their wisdom. To be strong enough to change, to wear away and remain, to be shaped and still rise, to hold both memory and future in the same patient curve of ridge and slope. This is what mountains know, and what we remember when we walk their paths. Now let us return once more to the stillness of the mountain, not from a distance, but from within, as if we were resting against its side, listening closely not to wind or echo, but to the silence that lives beneath all sound, the silence of stone that has seen ages pass and remained. For though the mountain appears silent, it is not empty. It is filled with the slow murmur of time, with the press and shift of rock upon rock, with the frozen rhythm of glaciers as they move by, inches reshaping everything in their slow descent. Even the snow, falling in fine flakes, adds its weight to this long story. Over centuries, snow becomes fern, and fern becomes ice, dense and blue at the core, carving its way through valleys, leaving behind U-shaped traces where V-shaped gorges once were. These glacial paths are more than erosion. They are signatures of patience. And when the ice retreats, it leaves lakes like mirrors and meadows rich with crushed minerals, where wildflowers bloom in spring like memories reawakened. The mountain gives, even as it changes. Its slopes break down into rivers. Its cliffs crumble into sand. Its minerals flow into soil, nourishing trees that never saw the peaks. The trees fall and feed the earth, and the earth feeds the roots. Again, the cycle continues, and the mountain, though it appears unchanging, is part of every field and forest, every garden and grain. In this way, mountains reach farther than we see. Their influence is not only vertical, not only visual. It flows outward through watersheds, through wind patterns, through culture. People who live near mountains often carry them in their language, their stories, their songs. They learn to read the sky, to listen for the warning in wind, to measure the snow not just by depth but by feel. They tell stories of spirits in the rocks, of ancestors who live in the peaks, of gods who send thunder down through the ravines. And in these tales, there is wisdom, not just of myth, but of observation, of connection. The mountain teaches, not with speech, but with example. It shows how to stand, how to bear weight, how to rest while still rising. It does not rush. It allows each season to pass. Spring with its melt and avalanche, summer with its alpine bloom, autumn with its rust and gold, winter with its hush, its white silence, and then again, spring, always returning, always changing, never forced. There is comfort in that rhythm, in knowing that even the hardest stone is part of a cycle. And when storms come, as they always do, the mountain absorbs them. Lightning may strike its peak, rain may rush down its slopes, snow may bury it deep, but still it remains. And when the storm passes, it does not speak of struggle. It simply continues. We, too, face storms. We feel erosion in our own lives, grief, loss, times, slow carving. But in the bones of the mountain, we find a mirror for endurance. We learn that being weathered is not the same as being broken. That strength lies not in resisting change, but in allowing it to move through us, in shaping ourselves around it. And as we sit in the quiet beneath the cliffs, as we watch clouds gather and break, as we feel the ground solid beneath our feet, we remember that we are part of this earth. Our own bones carry minerals once held in stone. Our breath contains air that has passed over peaks and through ancient forests. Our hearts beat with rhythms that echo the long, slow pulse of shifting plates. We are not visitors here. We are woven into the land, and the mountain reminds us of that belonging. It does not push us away. It holds us, gives us place. Even in its solitude, it offers connection. Even in its silence, it speaks. So when we leave the mountain, when we return to the valleys and the cities and the smaller, swifter rhythms of daily life, we carry its lesson with us. We remember to move slowly, to breathe deeply, to root ourselves when we can, to rise when we must, and to allow time to do its work, not in fear, but in trust. For beneath the layers of change, beneath the shifting paths and falling stones, the mountain remains. It is not what it once was, and it will not always be what it is now, but it is always true, always present, always offering us a place to stand. And in its bones, we remember our own. Step quietly now into the forest, where the light filters down in golden shafts through leaves that have known the passage of centuries, where every twig crackles like a secret and the air itself feels older, wiser, filled with things that cannot be seen but can always be felt. This is not just a collection of trees. It is a world within a world, layered with breath and silence and slow conversation. The forest does not speak in the way we do, yet it is always whispering through the creak of branches, the flutter of leaves, the rustle of small creatures moving through underbrush. And beneath the surface, beyond what the eye can catch. There are deeper whispers still, carried through soil and root, through scent and signal, in the language of chemicals and connection. A forest is not a place of isolation, but of intimacy. Each tree is part of a vast network, rooted not only in the ground but in the presence of others. Their roots do not grow alone, they reach toward one another, intertwining, touching, sometimes even fusing. Fungi thread themselves through this network, forming mycorrhizal partnerships that extend for miles beneath the soil. These fungal threads, finer than a hair, act as messengers, transporting nutrients and water, but also information. When a tree is under stress, when it lacks water, or is attacked by insects, sends chemical signals through the network, warning its neighbors. In response, other trees may shift their chemistry, produce more defenses, share their stored sugars. This web of life, often called the Wood Wide Web, is as real and complex as any system we have built above ground. It is ancient, it is quiet, and it is always alive. Walk through a forest and you will feel it. You may not know why, but your body will. Your breathing will slow. Your heart rate may settle. Something inside you will recognize the pattern of balance, of connection, of patient thriving. Even in stillness, the forest is growing. Trees stretch upward and outward, their canopies opening to the sky like open palms. Their leaves gather sunlight and pull in carbon dioxide, transforming it into sugars that feed the tree and oxygen that fills the air. Each breath you take beside them is shared. Each inhale of yours is part of their exhale. And as they photosynthesize, they also listen. Tiny pores on their leaves open and close, regulating moisture, responding to heat and light. Roots sense gravity, moisture, even sound. Some studies suggest that roots will grow toward the sound of running water, as though hearing it before they touch it. The forest is not just passively existing, it is aware in its own way, not with thoughts, but with presence, with a form of knowing that exists in patterns and growth and response. In spring, the forest rises with energy, buds unfurl, sap flows, songbirds return and fill the air with color and sound. In summer, the canopy thickens into deep green shade, sheltering ferns and mosses and shy mammals moving softly through the understory. In autumn, the trees let go, not in sorrow, but in wisdom, turning their leaves brilliant gold and red, then releasing them to the ground, feeding the soil with what they no longer need. And in winter, the forest rests, not dead, not silent, simply conserving, waiting, dreaming in bark and root, ready for the light to return. This rhythm is older than cities, older than memory. It is written in the rings of tree trunks, in the layers of fallen leaves, in the migration paths of animals that pass through. The forest remembers. Trees that have stood for hundreds of years carry within them the memory of droughts, of storms, of fire and regrowth. Some species cannot even sprout unless touched by flame cones, sealed with resin that melt only in heat. Seeds released only when the forest has been cleared and fed by ash. Destruction and rebirth are both part of the story. And through it all, the whispers continue. Sometimes they are chemical, signals riding the wind from leaf to leaf. Sometimes they are electrical, tiny pulses traveling through phloem as if along nerve paths. Sometimes they are scent, the sweet or bitter perfumes of survival and invitation. And sometimes they are sound, not loud, but real. The creak of a trunk in wind, the patter of rain on layered leaves, the call of a distant owl, echoed by silence. All of it part of the forest's language. Even the dead are not silent here. Fallen logs, rotting stumps, buried roots, they teem with life. Insects burrow, fungi bloom, mosses cloak decay in softness. The forest feeds on its past, transforms it into growth. Nothing is wasted. Even in death, a tree becomes a nurse log, a cradle for seedlings, a host for beetles, a feast for roots. This is how the forest thrives, not in competition alone, but in communion. And this is what we forget. We walk through the forest as visitors, imagining it still and simple. But it is neither. It is complex, layered, sentient in ways we are only beginning to understand. It holds the air, the soil, the water. It moderates temperature. It captures carbon. It shelters species whose names we may never know. And when it is cut, it is not just the loss of trees. It is the silence of a language interrupted. It is the breaking of a conversation that took centuries to build. The forest whispers still, but only if we listen. Let us now walk more deeply into the forest's hidden corridors, into the hush beneath the canopy where filtered light scatters like dust, and roots weave a braided tapestry just beneath our feet, where every branch overhead and every patch of moss below is part of a vast conversation unfolding in slow motion. This place is not random. It is a layered harmony, a cathedral of living systems tuned to time's gentle touch. Each tree is part of a lineage that may span centuries, and every inch of soil beneath it holds more organisms than there are stars in the sky, each one playing its role in the symphony of decay and renewal. The scent of damp bark, the curl of a fern, unfurling in silence, the glimmer of dew on a spider's webble are notes in this soft language, speaking of balance, rhythm, and response. Underneath it all, unseen but ever present, fungal networks continue their tireless work, connecting tree to tree, sapling to elder, passing nitrogen, phosphorus, even carbon from one to another like quiet acts of generosity. A mother tree, ancient and tall, might send extra sugars to her shaded offspring struggling to grow in the shadow of her crown. Or, sensing the approach of drought, she might signal others to brace, to tighten, to conserve. The forest listens because it must. It cannot flee danger, so it adapts with awareness embedded in its roots. Even leaves have memory. A tree that suffers repeated attack may react faster each time, adjusting its chemistry to deter predators. Wounds are not forgotten. They are woven into the tree's future, just as a forest that has burned returns, not as a copy of what was lost, but as a new chapter grown from the ashes. Fire, though often feared, is part of many forests' breath. Certain pine cones open only under heat, their seeds waiting years for the right moment to fall and root. Fire clears old undergrowth, returns minerals to soil, opens space for new light. It is destruction, yes, but it is also renewal. And the forest understands this. In every transition, there is purpose. In every falling leaf, there is a promise of spring. And while the forest may seem to slumber through winter's silence, it is merely conserving, storing sugars in roots, preserving moisture, hardening its buds against frost. Life continues in quiet pulses slow sap flows. The occasional stir of a small animal beneath snow, the tight curl of green waiting to stretch open when warmth returns. Even trees whose branches look bare are already preparing for rebirth. Their buds, sealed tight, hold leaves curled in tiny fists. The forest lives in cycles, not lines. Day to night, season to season, growth to decay to growth again. And within this cycle, thousands of lives unfold, each tied to the forest's timing. Birds nest when insects are plentiful. Fungi fruit when the air is damp and dark. Bears wake from hibernation just as the berries ripen. Nothing is alone in its rhythm. Everything is coordinated by cues. We do not always hear the tilt of the sun, the wetness of the air, the pull of moonlight across branches. The forest, in its fullness, is a timekeeper. Its rings hold years like pages. In drought years, the rings are narrow. In years of plenty, they widen. A single trunk holds decades of weather, fire, disease, and healing. Dendrochronologists, scientists who study tree rings can read a forest's autobiography in slices no thicker than a coin. And this record extends not just backward, but forward. The forest prepares for future generations. Seeds lie dormant until conditions are right. Root systems stretch slowly into untouched soil. Some trees grow for centuries before they flower. There is no rush. The forest moves at the pace of trust. And when the oldest trees fall, their bodies feed the ground for decades more. A single log can host entire ecosystems. Fungi, mosses, beetles, salamanders. The dead support the living. Nothing is wasted. Even rot is a gift. And this generosity, this unending loop of giving, is the forest's truest whisper. It does not hoard, it circulates. It teaches that strength is not in speed, but in steadiness. That community matters more than competition. That there is wisdom in pausing, in waiting, in allowing others to grow beside you. When forests are intact, they moderate climate, draw down carbon, regulate water. They breathe for the planet. But when cut, they lose their memory. When fragmented, they lose their voice. A clear-cut forest is not just a loss of trees, it is the silencing of generations of conversations, of connections woven over lifetimes. And though forests can return, and often do, it takes time. 100 years to rebuild what was lost in a day. The young trees will reach upward, but the old ones carried knowledge, their roots deeper, their chemistry more complex, their connections richer. Replanting is not the same as restoring. Yet the forest forgives. It comes back when given the chance. It sprouts from stumps. It reclaims abandoned fields. It returns, patient and green, even after fire or flood. Because the forest is not only a place, it is a process, a becoming, a resilience stitched into leaf and bark and soil. And we, though often distant from it, are still part of its pattern. In every breath we take, in every bite of fruit, in every plank of wood that shelters us, the forest is present. We carry its breath in our lungs, its strength in our homes, its quiet in our bones. And when we stand beneath its canopy, even for a moment, we remember. We remember what it means to belong to something larger, slower, wiser than ourselves. Let us now linger a while longer beneath the canopy. Not to move forward, but to remain, to sit in the breath of the forest and simply let it surround us. For there is something deeply healing in this act of being among trees. You may not hear a single word spoken, yet everything around you is speaking you's slow, steady chorus of growth and decay, of shade and light, of moisture rising from soil and falling again as mist upon bark and leaf. The forest does not hurry. It does not need to prove its purpose. It simply exists in fullness, and that fullness has room for everything, the fallen and the blooming, the ancient and the newly sprouted, the crawling and the soaring, all held in balance by an intelligence that does not shout but hums through the roots and reins and rings of trees. In the stillness, if you sit long enough, your thoughts begin to quiet. The chatter that follows you fades. You start to notice smaller things, the gentle sway of the understory in a breeze you didn't feel, the way sunlight turns the edge of a fern into gold, the faint knock of a woodpecker deep in the trunks beyond sight. There is peace here, not because nothing happens, but because everything that does is necessary. Even death in the forest is part of the choreography. When a tree falls, it does not end its usefulness. Its bark becomes home to lichen. Its interior hollows feed beetles. Its surface welcomes moss. Roots of young trees may tangle into the spaces it leaves behind, weaving through the softened heartwood, finding nourishment in the body of what once stood tall. And when that same tree was alive, it too grew from the compost of others. In this way, each life is braided into another. Nothing stands alone. Even the air between the trees is shaped by what they exhale, filtered of dust, rich with oxygen, laced with terpene scents that calm the nervous system, slow the pulse, ease the breath. Scientists studying forest bathing, what the Japanese call Shinrin-yoku, have found that simply spending time among trees lowers cortisol levels, reduces inflammation, deepens sleep. But these facts are only confirmations of what the heart already knows. The forest heals, not by fixing, but by holding. It does not pull us away from ourselves. It brings us home to what we forgot we were part of. Every culture that has lived close to forests has stories of spirits or voices among the trees. Whether seen as gods or guardians, the sense is always the same. Something is listening, something ancient and aware. Perhaps it is not a mind in the way we understand minds, but a presence woven into the structure of life, the way a grove of aspens is not a collection of trees, but a single organism, sharing one root system, one underground body, with many visible forms. Walk through such a grove, and you're walking not among individuals, but through one great being, each trunk a limb, each leaf a breath. And even in solitary trees, an oak in a pasture, a cedar on a hillside, there is connection. Birds perch and sing, insects nest and lay eggs, fungi link their roots to distant neighbors. A tree may stand alone to our eyes, but it never lives alone. It pulls nutrients from ancient stone, exchanges messages through root and soil, feeds generations with its fruit, and provides shade where grass may grow softer. We call trees silent, but we're only just beginning to hear them. When drought tightens its grip, trees shift their chemistry. When light grows scarce, they reorganize their leaves. When a limb is cut, they seal the wound and strengthen the wood around it. And when one falls, the network adjusts, reorganizes. Resilience is not an accident. It is a practice written into the DNA of forests, a response refined over millions of years. And yet, for all their endurance, forests are not invincible. Clear-cutting, fragmentation, climate change, they disrupt the relationships that keep forests alive. They do not just remove trees, they silence whispers. They sever conversations between root and root, leaf and sky. But even then, the forest does not blame, it waits, it regrows, it returns wherever it is given space. A single acorn can become an oak that will shade 10 generations. A fallen seed caught in a crack of concrete may grow into a sapling strong enough to break the stone. The forest does not require perfection, it requires patience. And in that, it reminds us how to begin again, not with force, but with presence. Let us remember that we are made from the same carbon as the bark, the same water that flows through roots, the same sunlight held briefly in the green of every leaf. Let us breathe in what the trees offer and return it with our breath. Let us walk not as strangers, but as kin. The forest is always whispering. We need only remember how to hear. Long before cities rose and words were spoken, a moment not marked by thunder or ceremony, but by the quiet flicker of awareness passing like light behind the eyes of a distant ancestor, a thought. This was not the birth of intelligence alone, but of self-recognition, of wondering. Somewhere deep within the body of an early hominin, in the curve of a brain expanding behind a sloped forehead, electricity sparked in a way it hadn't before. Neurons connected, not just to sense, but to reflect. A face looked into water and perhaps lingered longer. A hand touched stone and remembered the weight of it. A mother carried her child, not only from instinct, but from love shaped by recognition, from knowledge of before and fear of loss. And so the mind began its journey, not as a sudden gift, but as a gradual unfolding, layer upon layer of thought, building across generations. The brain, already remarkable in its structure, began to specialize, developing regions for language, memory, imagination. Beneath it, the limbic system pulsed with emotion, forming the foundation for joy, fear, longing. A being who remembered, planned, imagined what was not yet real. And so humanity emerged, slowly, quietly, out of the plains of Africa, walking not only with feet, but with thought, carrying in their heads the most complex structure known in the universe. This brain-soft, warm, folding inward upon itself, used more energy than any other organ. Nervous system grew into stories, into symbols, into shared belief. Around fires, ancestors spoke in gestures, in grunts, in chants that carried memory across time. They painted their world in ochre and ash, not only to record, but to belong, to connect with something beyond the present moment. And the mind grew stronger with use, sculpted by experience, shaped by every sensory wave that crashed against it. Neurons fired and rewired, adapting with plastic grace. The brain was not a fixed machine. It was a living landscape, a forest of thoughts, pruned and shaped by time. Each new challenge etched fresh paths. Each relationship carved new bridges. And inside this evolving network, identity began to bloom. The idea of self, fragile and flickering, took root. I am, I was, I will be. With that came wonder, but also worry. The mind that can dream is also the mind that can dread. The gift of thought came with the price of awareness, mortality, loss, the question of why. And so, Humans search not only for food, but for meaning. They followed stars, traced the paths of animals, listened to the wind through the grass. They saw patterns and gave them names. They mapped constellations onto the night. They created gods, not only to worship, but to speak, to make sense of the storms and silences. And all the while, their brains adapted further. Language took root in Broca's area, comprehension in Wernicke's, the corpus callosum, linking the hemispheres, thickened with use, allowing intuition and logic to converse. Memory found a home in the hippocampus, looping past to present. The amygdala burned with fear and fire. The prefrontal cortex, last to mature, gave rise to planning, restraint, imagination. A child, born into the warmth of the clan, began with reflex and sensation, but soon asked why, dreamed of tomorrow, remembered yesterday, and so thought became more than reaction. It became creation, and creation, in turn, changed the world. Stones became tools, tools became spears, spears became plows. And from the harvest came villages, then cities, then civilizations. But the brain remained the same, still folded, still humming, still dancing with electricity. We marvel at machines, at circuits and code, but none rival the mystery of the mind. 86 billion neurons, each with thousands of connections, firing in waves and rhythms, in bursts of insight and long tides of emotion. In this storm of signals lives the self not as a single place, but as an experience, changing with every moment. You are not who you were an hour ago. Your thoughts have shifted. Even sleep rewrites the mind, pruning and strengthening, making room for more. And in that sleep, dreams rise, echoes of memory, fragments of story, rehearsals for tomorrow. Dreams are the brain's way of listening to itself, of integrating, inventing, resolving. They are proof that thought continues even in stillness. The thought that walked upright never stopped moving. It learned to build, to paint, to write, to wonder about stars and atoms, to explore the oceans, to study itself. fMRI scans, watching regions flare with activity. They see the patterns of attention, of joy, of fear, and still, so much remains unknown. Where is a memory stored? Not in a single cell, but in a pattern. Not in a file, but in a dance. The mind does not keep a ledger, it weaves a tapestry. And in that weaving, we become, we change, we carry within us every place we've been, every word we've heard, every face we've loved. The brain, though soft, is strong. It bends with sorrow. It brightens with beauty. It holds trauma, and it heals. It walks not only in steps, but in questions, in reaching, in imagining what comes next. Let us now step gently into the space where thought deepens, where the mind becomes not just a tool for survival, but a window to wonder, where imagination takes root and begins to bloom in colors never seen, sounds never heard, ideas never touched by the physical world, and yet felt as surely as breath. The human mind, shaped by evolution, strengthened by need, expanded through time, began to carry. More than memory, it began to carry possibility. Not only what was, but what could be. This is the heart of our species' difference. In the quiet of the brain's inner folds, thought began to rehearse the future, to tell stories before events unfolded, to build models of reality and revise them with every new experience. This power the power to imagine made us architects of things that did not yet exist. A child tracing shapes in the dirt was practicing a language not yet written. A hunter pausing before a trail imagined where prey might go. A parent rocking a sick child, worried not from instinct, but from the understanding of cause and consequence. Thought gave birth to tools, but more than that, it gave birth to empathy, to questions, to art. As the brain evolved, its connections multiplied, experience shaped it, culture rewired it, education carved deeper paths. Waves. Some connections grow stronger with repetition, others fade. This is neuroplasticity, the mind's quiet capacity to adapt, and through it, each person becomes a world unto themselves, built from billions of signals pulsing and shaping a sense of self, and this self, strange and ever-shifting, began to seek. The mind wanted to know where it came from, where it was going, what lay beyond the stars and beneath the skin. It turned inward and found emotion, turned outward and found meaning. Thought began to reflect on thought itself, to question its own origin, to wonder what it meant to be aware. This recursive miracle consciousness emerged not as a single event, but as a gradient, rising from the simple awareness of a worm to the complex inner dialogue of a poet. We do not yet fully understand consciousness, though we live inside it. It is both mirror and maker, both lamp and shadow. It changes. When observed, it deepens. When shared, connection became as important as cognition. The brain, social by necessity, learned to read faces, to sense tone, to understand intention, direction. But for poetry, for confession, for dreams, we began to write, to paint, to carve. We left messages in caves, in stone, in song. Thought, once hidden in the privacy of the skull, spilled outward into culture, into memory, stored outside. The body, books, became external brains, maps, external eyes, machines, eventually, extended both, hand and mind. And yet, beneath all this advancement, the brain remained vulnerable. It could be hurt, it could heal, it could fall into patterns that misfired anxiety, obsession, confusion, and still, it would try again, reform new connections, find new paths. It was resilient, not because it resisted change, but because it adapted to it. And in this flexibility, we found creativity. Artists and scientists alike used the same fundamental gift, the ability to combine seemingly unrelated things into something new. The same neuron that remembers a bird may help imagine a spaceship. The same emotional circuitry that felt fear may help us write a novel about courage. The boundaries in the brain are not walls, but bridges. Everything touches everything. And this is how learning happens, not by stacking facts, but by weaving meaning. And the mind, always hungry for meaning, keeps weaving. Even in dreams, it sorts and strings together the fragments of life, assembling memories, hopes, worries into stories that make no sense but feel deeply true. Sleep is not escape, it is processing, healing, integration, and in waking life, thought continues its quiet dance. When we speak, we are shaping breath into meaning. When we listen, we are decoding airwaves into emotion. When we remember, we are reconstructing, ever perfect, always personal. Every memory is a new version of the last, every belief a living shape. And still, we wonder, who am I inside all this? Is the self the voice that speaks inside, the silent observer, the sum of memories, the awareness behind the eyes? Neuroscience searches for answers in networks and regions. Philosophy searches in being and experience. And the truth may be somewhere between. Perhaps the self is not a single thing, but a song, ever-changing, with notes from every moment lived. Perhaps what walks upright is not just flesh, but story and unfolding narrative stitched together by neurons, breath, sensation. And in this story, every person is a page, every interaction a sentence, every act of thought another verse. We are not alone in this. The more we study other minds of dolphins, of elephants, of crows, of octopuses, the more we see glimmers of thought in other forms. Intelligence is not a ladder, but a garden. It blooms differently in each species. And consciousness may be more common than we once believed, but the human mind, for now, holds a special kind of fire. It remembers the past, imagines the future, shapes tools, builds symphonies, writes down dreams. It holds love, fear, doubt, courage all within the same skull, all within the same night. It is a marvel of nature, born from cells and sparks, shaped by experience, enriched by others. And though we still know so little, the journey of thought continues. It walks upright, still curious, still unfinished, still asking, what else is possible? And now let us walk slowly to the edge of thought, not to leave it behind, but to see where it stretches toward the stars, toward the cells, toward the mirror, toward itself, because the journey of the human mind has never been one of arrival, but of expansion, of leaning forward into the unknown with wonder in its core and silence beneath its feet. The thought that once stood upright beneath the African sun now travels at the speed of light through fiber and signal, decoding galaxies, mapping genes, building machines that echo its own architecture. But even as it advances outward, it continues to fold inward, asking not only how things work, but why they matter. Every idea it holds is born from thousands of subtle impressions, the tone of a voice, the scent of a room, the weight of a gaze. We are made of sensations we cannot name, memories we do not recall, dreams we have not yet dreamed, and still, we go on thinking, even when language falters. Thought continues in music, in gesture, in art, in mathematics. A painting is a thought made visible. A melody is a thought set free. A sculpture is a thought in weight and texture. Thought, it turns out, is not always words. It is form. It is feeling. It is the invisible scaffold behind everything we build, everything we fear, everything we love. And through it, we are able not just to survive, but to imagine joy, to create beauty, to comfort others, to forgive, to hope. Hope itself is one of thought's most delicate and powerful gifts, the ability to believe in what does not yet exist, to act toward a future that cannot be guaranteed. It is hope that led us to fire, to agriculture, to cities, to medicine, to poetry. It is hope that lets us raise children, tend gardens, share stories by candlelight, and even in the darkest places, when pain clouds the mind, when sorrow floods the senses, thought continues quietly repairing, slowly adjusting, finding new paths through the woods of despair. The brain is capable of healing not just the body, but the mind itself. New neurons can grow, old circuits can be rewired, trauma can be softened by care, memory reshaped by compassion. Even grief, which feels like an ending, can open the mind to a new kind of depth, a new form of attention. The same thought that mourns can also remember, can also honor. In this way, we are more than our wounds. We are the ones who learn from them. And the story continues, not because we always understand it, but because we are willing to walk it. Each generation adds to the unfolding map. Children are born with minds ready to learn language, to imitate, to explore, but they are also born ready to connect, to laugh when we laugh, to cry when we cry, to reach for hands, to gaze into eyes. Connection is not something we teach. It is something we remember. And it is through connection that thought grows. Alone, a mind can wonder. Together, minds can build civilizations. And so we pass on our questions, our knowledge, our mistakes. We build libraries, schools, digital archives. We tell bedtime stories. We write lullabies. We encode meaning in symbols, in code, in science, in song. And in doing so, we give thought a longer life. We stretch its reach across centuries. The cave paintings of Lascaux are still thinking, in a way, still speaking. The equations of Newton still hold in every falling apple. The words of poets long dead still shape the heart. The thought that walked upright never needed to run. It needed only to persist, and it has. Across deserts, over mountains, through plagues and wars and peace and play, it has endured, it has evolved, it has imagined. And now we ask new questions. Can machines think? Can thoughts live outside the body? Can consciousness be mapped, copied, preserved? We build artificial intelligence, neural networks, models of mind, and yet, at the center, the mystery remains. We still do not fully understand how thought arises from matter. We still do not know where awareness comes from, or where it goes when we sleep, when we die. But perhaps we do not need all the answers. Perhaps wonder is enough. Perhaps it is the asking, the imagining, the gentle unfolding that matters most. After all, the brain itself did not know what it would become. It only responded to life, to experience, to love. And through that response, it created everything we know. So tonight, when your head rests on your pillow, remember this: the mind you carry is not just yours. It is made from every voice you've heard, every story you've held, every hand you've touched, every mystery you've met. It is ancient and newborn, fragile and unbreakable, full of questions, full of light. It is the thought that walked, upright tanned, still does, far beyond the clouds that cradle our weather, beyond the gentle blue curve of atmosphere that hugs the earth. There is a silence so wide, so still, it stretches across light years without end. A hush so perfect, it cradles galaxies in its arms without stirring the dust. This silence, the vast, breathless dark between the stars, is not empty. It is filled with time. It holds the echo of beginnings. It holds the memory of light, and it waits. In that waiting, something begins, not with noise, not with flame, but with the quiet presence of possibility. Before there were stars, there was only darkness, thick with energy, but without form. Then, in the earliest moments after the universe was born, light broke free, particles collided and coalesced, hydrogen formed, and from hydrogen, eventually, stars. The first stars did not shine quietly like the ones we know. They were massive, hot, short-lived, pouring ultraviolet light into a universe still veiled in fog. And when they died, they exploded in brilliance, scattering heavy elements into the quiet. The silence between the stars became sprinkled with iron, carbon, oxygen ingredients for planets, for oceans, for us. And still, between those distant suns, the silence held. Today, when we look up at the night sky, we see stars scattered like grains of salt on velvet, but most of what we see is dark. The space between stars is not merely distance, it is history. It is the light that hasn't reached us yet. It is galaxies too faint to touch our eyes. It is the glow of background radiation, the fading warmth of the Big Bang, still humming in microwaves across the universe. And this darkness, this space between, is not dead. It is alive with motion. It expands, it stretches. Galaxies drift apart, carried on the fabric of space-time like leaves on an unseen river. And in this expansion, the silence grows not as absence, but as room. Room for stars to be born. Room for light to travel. Room for thoughts like ours to arise on small blue planets tucked into quiet corners. The silence between the stars is not a void to be feared. It is a cradle, a field of patience so vast we can barely imagine it. Inside, nebula clouds of gas and dust new stars are forming even now. They coalesce from chaos, pulled inward by gravity, their cores igniting. With nuclear fire, each new star lights up its corner of the dark, and as those photons travel, they cross vast plains of silence. They pass through interstellar dust, brush against frozen comets, bend slightly in the gravity of invisible black holes. Light journeys with no map, and still it moves. The silence it travels through is not silent in the way we know silence. It carries radiation. It carries waves, radio, microwave, X-ray, all forms of energy moving through a near-perfect vacuum. There are particles, too rare and far between, lonely protons, wandering neutrinos, the ghost-like shadows of matter we call dark. And here and there, magnetic fields swirl across empty light years, shaped by stellar winds and galactic tides. Even in the deepest space, there is structure. There are filaments of matter connecting galaxy clusters like cosmic spiderwebs, stretching across billions of light years. And yet, between these threads, the silence reigns. It is not cold in a way we can feel it, is almost the absence of temperature, a place where molecules cannot cling together, where sound cannot carry, where all things drift in endless quiet. And from this quiet, everything we know has come. Our sun, our planet, the atoms in our bones, all born from stars, and stars born from silence. This silence is not nothing. It is the space in which everything happens. Without it, there could be no stars, no motion, no time. It is the pause that allows the note to sing. It is the dark that makes the light visible. And yet, for all its vastness, we have begun to reach across it. With telescopes, we gather light from galaxies so distant that we see them not as they are, but as they were billions of years ago. With radio dishes, we listen for pulses from collapsed stars, for whispers from alien civilizations, for the background hum of the universe expanding. And with spacecraft, we reach into the silence directly, sending metal emissaries to drift beyond the edge of our solar system. carrying golden records etched with greetings and music, our own small voice, into the great quiet. Voyager drifts now through interstellar space, its instruments aging, its energy fading, but still moving forward. It travels not toward anything in particular, but away from everything it has ever known. It is a symbol not of escape, but of curiosity, of the thought that walked upright, looking beyond its sky and asking, what else is there? And the silence answers, not with words, but with presence. It does not need to speak to be heard. It surrounds us every night in the gap between stars, in the dark between thoughts, in the moment between breath and breath. It is there when we look up and wonder. It is there when we dream. It is there when we pause. The silence between the stars is not absence. It is invitation. Let us float deeper now into that vast and patient dark, not as travelers seeking to conquer, but as listeners drawn by the quiet hum of space, the quiet pull of mystery that has lived in us since the first night our ancestors tilted their heads toward stars and traced stories into the sky. Even then, thousands of years ago, before telescopes, before engines, before numbers were written, the silence between the stars had already shaped our imaginations. We saw constellations where there were only burning spheres of gas. We gave names to Orion, to the Pleiades, to the path of the Milky Way stretched across the night like spilled milk or a river of silver light. These shapes gave us direction, season, story. We followed them across deserts, across oceans, across time. But what gave them their power was not only the stars, was the silence between them. That made each point of light stand out like a thought in the mind's darkness. Without the silence, the stars would be invisible. And so too in science, it is often the spaces between that matter most. The spaces between atoms, between signals, between pulses of light from a distant quasar, or the whisper of a pulsar spinning with impossible precision. Astronomers listen to this silence not with ears, but with instruments tuned to frequencies we cannot hear. They catch the microwave afterglow of the Big Bang, stretched thin by time and distance. They catch the X-rays from black holes that bend light and space like silk in water. They gather the radio pulses from magnetars and the infrared glow from clouds where stars are still waiting to be born. The silence holds them all, like a canvas holds paint, like a breath holds song. And though we live on a small planet orbiting an ordinary star in an arm of a modest galaxy, we have learned to hear across billions of light years. We know now that the universe is not steady, is expanding, and not slowly, but accelerating, pulled outward by something we do not yet understand. We call it dark energy, and we do not know what it is, only that it fills the void between galaxies, pushing them apart, stretching the fabric of space itself. And still, the silence holds. Galaxies swirl in the deep, their stars orbiting centers of darkness, supermassive black holes, so dense and quiet they swallow even light. Around them, stars dance in curves we cannot see, drawn by a gravity we feel but cannot touch. Dark matter, they call it, another mystery. It makes up most of the universe's mass, yet we cannot see it, cannot hold it, but we know it's there because of what it does. It shapes the silence. It holds the galaxies in its invisible arms. It keeps the universe together. And so we learn. The greatest forces are often invisible, often silent, often soft, And perhaps it is not the stars alone that make the cosmos beautiful, but the silence they are born into, the black between that holds their light in place. Silence is not lifeless, it is full of potential. In silence, the first atoms formed. In silence, galaxies spun into being. And in silence, the earth cooled, clouds gathered, rain fell, life began. Even here, on our small world, silence is necessary. In the silence of deep oceans, strange creatures glow. In the silence of sleep, memories settle. In the silence between notes, music finds meaning. And inside us, in the quiet of thought, we meet ourselves. The neurons in our brain fire in silence. The heart beats in rhythmic hush. Our bones do not shout. Our breath is soft, and yet we live. We wonder, we love. The silence between the stars is not separate from us. It made us. We are stardust, as Carl Sagan said, but we are also space dust. We are atoms assembled by ancient explosions, but also shaped by the spaces between, by the gravity that held us, the time that slowed us, the quiet that allowed our thoughts to grow. And still, we reach outward. The James Webb Space Telescope now peers deeper than ever before, capturing galaxies from when the universe was young, when stars were first forming, when silence was beginning to break into light. We send rovers to Mars, probes to moons, telescopes into orbital, to listen, to look, to wonder. And perhaps someday we will travel farther. Perhaps we will cross interstellar distances, visit planets circling other suns, hear the static of new atmospheres. But no matter how far we go, we will always be surrounded by silence. It is the one constant. The stars change, the galaxies shift, but silence, deep and wide, remains. And it welcomes us not as intruders, but as children returned to something older than memory. For when we sit beneath the stars, when we feel that hush wrap around us, we are not separate from it. We are part of the same story. A story written in hydrogen and helium, in carbon and nitrogen, in dark and light and time. A story that begins in silence and returns to it, and so we listen. We build instruments to translate the whispers. We study the flicker of distant suns. We watch the dance of planets we may never touch. And we know that in all that distance, in all that dark, we are not alone, not because others are near, but because the silence itself is with us. It holds us. It teaches us to look, to wait, to imagine. And perhaps that is the greatest gift of all, that in the silence between the stars, we remember how to listen. And now, as we drift in stillness through the final reaches of this silent ocean of stars, let us pause, not in fear or smallness, but in awe of what it means to exist within such vastness, to be made of atoms shaped in stellar cores and carried here by time and gravity and the quiet generosity of the universe. The silence between the stars is not empty. It is holding us. It is older than language, wider than thought, deeper than sorrow, calmer than joy. It is the resting breath of a cosmos in motion. It does not ask us to be anything more than we are. It only asks us to be, to feel, to wonder. For even in the stillness of space, there is movements, slow, patient, luminous. Dust collects, light travels, planets form, and on one of those planets, circling a modest star, life arose that could gaze upward, and for the first time in billions of years, the silence was named. We called it night, we called it sky, we called it mystery. And then we began to describe it with numbers, with equations, with dreams and diagrams and delicate instruments. But even still, the silence remained. It remained not to be solved, but to be shared. And now we share it in poetry and science, in music and mathematics, in radio waves sent into the dark with the hope that someone, somewhere, might answer, in golden discs engraved with the sounds of whales and batch and greetings, in many tongues, in photographs of Earth from far away, where our whole planet is just a blue dot suspended in darkness. That darkness is not absence, it is context. It is the stage upon which the light becomes meaningful. And we are part of that light brief, flickering yet real, real in our questions, real in our longing, real in our ability to wonder what lies beyond and within. The silence between the stars is also the silence within us, the pause between thoughts, the breath before a word, the stillness that falls over us in grief, in beauty, in love, too large for language. It is there when we are born and when we die, and in every moment we sit quietly and simply notice that we are alive. In a way, the silence is always speaking. We hear it when we stare into the night, not looking for anything in particular. We hear it when we lie in the grass and feel the turning of the earth beneath us. We hear it when we close our eyes and let the world go quiet. It asks nothing but our attention, and in giving it, we receive more than answers. We receive presence, the kind that does not need to explain itself, the kind that simply is. And perhaps that is the great secret. The silence is not empty because we are in it. Our minds, our hearts, our memories carry the echoes of stars. Our thoughts are waves moving through time. Our lives, though short, are woven into a tapestry so wide it cannot be held in any map. And yet we matter not because we are large, but because we are aware, because we notice, because we care. A small child, looking up at the night sky, is part of the story. An old woman, watching the moon from her porch, is part of the story. A scientist, adjusting a telescope, a poet, finishing a line, a lonely traveler listening to the wind, they are all part of the story of a universe that began in silence, gave rise to light, and eventually to beings who could reflect that light inward. And though we are still learning, still struggling, still searching, we are also remembering that we are not separate from the silence, but born of it, that in the dark we are not lost, but held, that even if we never reach another star, the stars live in us. They shine in the calcium of our bones, the iron in our blood, the oxygen we breathe. We are walking stardust, thinking stardust, stardust that dreams, and that is enough. That is everything. So tonight, when the world grows quiet and the sky above turns deep and wide and dark, listen. Listen not for sound, but for stillness. Listen not with your ears, but with your being. Feel the hush between the stars wrap around you like a blanket. Feel the vastness and the gentleness of it. And know this, you are not alone in it. You are part of the silence. You are part of the story. You are part of the stars.